Good morning. Today is the 8th day of Shvat, the 18th of January. And we're going to be looking at the 5th reading of Parashat Bo. And this piece is in Wonders. If you're following the Patreon, it should be up. I think it's up. So let me just read a little bit from it and maybe add a few more things. This is called the New World Order on Seder night. And this is connected to the fact that in this reading we hear about the first son, one of the sons. We'll see in a moment which one. 3 of the sons that we talk about at the Seder are described here in our Parsha. And one more is in Parshat V'etchanan later on in Deuteronomy. We actually talked about this, I believe, when we spoke last year about Parashat V'etchanan. I'm almost sure that we talked about it. Hopefully this will be another perspective on it. And the reason is, again, that there's 4 sons is because the sages recognize that in the Torah's account of the children coming to ask the elders about the observance of Passover, you see that there are 3 separate questions and answers here in our reading. So when performing the mitzvah of you shall tell your son on that day, the mitzvah that prompts us to sit together on the Seder night and retell the story of the Exodus from Egypt, the father must hone his message so that it will enter the hearts of all 4 sons described in the Agadah. Each son asks this question in a different style as it wells up from a different place in his psyche. In Hebrew, the word for question, which is she'elah, does not refer only to a query. It also means a wish or a desire. The 4 sons of the Seder are expressing the depths of their souls with their questions. They're saying what they desire, what they are looking for. The father must open his own heart and receive their questions with sensitivity so that he can truly understand them both on the intellectual plane and also connect to the existential stance concealed behind them. And then he must answer each of his children accordingly. The wise son asks an abstract intellectual question. Behind his questions lies an apprehension of the threats abounding in our material reality. The wise son is also requesting that his father guide him out of his abstract spiritual world and into action to rectify the lower worlds. So if we say that the first son, the wise son, he represents the world of emanation, which is above the material consciousness. There's only consciousness of God. It has a double risk. One is that it fears coming down. It's like bringing divinity into this world is very fearful for people. I remember the first time that I went to a gym in college and I had my tzitzis on. And there was a very nice and well-meaning Jew there who didn't know very much. But when he saw that I was wearing tzitzis in the gym, he came up to me and very quietly, it wasn't in front of everyone, he said, "It's not appropriate. How can you wear something that," again, he associated that you only do this when you're in a shul, in a synagogue. He didn't know that there was a requirement to wear tzitzis all the time, that he wasn't aware of. So in his world, this was like an abomination. How can you bring holiness into a place like a gym? For me, it was unquestionable. If it's exactly how you need to act. So there's a fear of bringing the divine down into this reality. On the other hand, there's also a fear of detachment. There's a fear that we become so spiritual because when a person has divine consciousness, he becomes aloof from the needs of the material world. Now, when it comes to him, it's not so terrible. A person can do with less anyway. It doesn't really matter. But the problem is usually that he becomes insensitive to the needs of others who are not at his spiritual level. And we know that the Baal Shem Tov had to request special, as it were, a favor from God to allow him both to be at the level of emanation, of Atzilut, and yet at the same time to be fully aware and to understand the troubles and the needs and the reason that people were coming to him for advice or for some kind of help. And that's the second fear. So on the one hand, bringing it down, the other hand, becoming too aloof. The Tam, who we call the earnest, simpleton son, expresses general wonder. Behind it is a desire for direct, simple guidance appropriate for him. He wants his father to help him negotiate the world, which is always full of surprises for him. The Tam, he represents the world of creation. The world of creation is an intellectual world. And the problem with the intellectual world is that you can become too sophisticated. And when you become too sophisticated, you really can't chart a course through our world. The world is too complex. We may have talked about this in the past, that when it comes to medicine, for instance, if you try to make everything too intellectual, in the end, you're probably going to kill the patient. There has to be a clear understanding that a direct approach is always the best, and not trying to think the problem. So this connection is what the Tam is looking for. In the sense, the Tam is searching to become an earnest person. He's searching to become a simpleton. That's why we call him the Tam. He's not yet a Tam. He's trying to become one. The wicked son asks with insolence, "What is this service to you?" Behind his question lies an aspiration for others to recognize his personal reality. More deeply, his question expresses his need to belong. He is asking his father to help him emerge from his egocentric, lonely, and conflicted existence and connect to the congregation of Israel and its supernal source. But what is concealed behind the silence of the son who does not know how to ask questions? The fourth son. To understand the son who does not know how to ask, we need to place him in context. So the Arizal explains that the son who does not know how to ask belongs to the world of formation. It's not exactly in the order. We would have thought that the world of action would have been the final son. But here they switch. And he is related to the world of formation. This is a place of the Beinoni. The Beinoni is the intermediate individual described in the Tanya, which is like us, a person who's always beset by conflict, inner conflict, between his drive to do good and his drive to not necessarily do evil, but to take care of himself, to be egocentric. So this is the person who's described in the Tanya, who is always in the throes of battle between his good and evil inclinations, his animal and divine souls. The Alter Rebbe says that the state of the Beinoni is the state of every person, meaning most of us, 99.999% of the people in the world, are in conflict, whether it be between the divine soul and the animal soul, the way he describes it in the Jewish people, or between the intellectual soul and the animal soul, the way it's described in relation to others. In that case, we are all the son who does not know how to ask. A person not knowing how to ask means that you are still confused about even what your mission in the world is. That's the biggest problem that the Beinoni has. The Beinoni is it's not clear to him, what exactly am I supposed to be doing here? That's why he can't ask. He can't ask because he doesn't even know what the goal is. He's constantly troubled by the fact that he's torn in two different directions. So he can't even make up his mind. And people try to create some kind of compartmentalized picture. Sometimes I'm this, sometimes I'm that. Or they just remain confused. A person who attempts to avoid conflict in his inner battle between his two inclinations is liable to enter a state of paralysis. But if you avoid the conflict, like we said, you don't even compartmentalize. Rather, you just ignore it and you just say, okay, whatever happens, happens. Sometimes I'm drawn here, sometimes I'm drawn there. It's all the same, I'm all one. You don't even know how to differentiate between the two. You reach a state of paralysis. He knows the limits of his intellect and therefore does not allow himself to ask intellectual questions out of a latent fear that a new insight will also require him to see things in a new light. It will require him to commit to new things. So he's different from the Tam. It's a very big problem that we usually have. And Rav Steinsaltz used it as his motto. He called it, "Let my people know." Meaning that there's a fear, there's an existential fear, especially among Jews, of learning Torah. And the fear is that if I learn something, well, first of all, I might be obligated. But what's really scary is my worldview will have to change. I'm going to have, and the moment that my worldview changes, even if my actions have not changed yet, I feel dissonant from the culture, from the society around me. And that's very frightening. for most people would like to just fit in. They would just like to be like everyone else. On the other hand, he fears that all his desires are nothing more than an expression of his evil inclination. Deep down, he doesn't even know what he truly wants. Like we said, he doesn't understand, or he doesn't have the capacity, the tools, to be able to define what exactly he's supposed to do in life. In our generation, the Beinoni is also the Baal Tshuva, the returnee to religious observance who does not know where to begin to ask. And this is always the thing that I felt always is problematic. There's all kinds of wonderful texts that have been translated, like a siddur that is really adapted to someone living in an English-speaking country or German-speaking or many languages. But what I've found is that these texts invariably assume that you already know a lot. And there's almost no way for a person to learn how to take the first steps in any kind of observance, whatever it is. So if you want to put tefillin on, so I'm sure you can find a YouTube video which will explain it. But if you want to even begin to know what it looks like to pray, and take you step by step, because you can't handle the whole gamut of the prayer, of the morning prayer, which is usually about 45 minutes long, and has so many different details and customs and things. You have to have someone who's taking you step by step, helping you along, and then open to asking, to responding to questions that you have at every stage. That's very rare to find. So a person like that, he's always locked into himself. He doesn't really know what he's supposed to do. He wants to come closer to God, but he doesn't even know what he is missing, what he should be searching for, and what he needs to rectify. The Haggadah directs us to open up to this child, and open him up, who does not know how to ask questions. That is what's really needed, to go out and to talk to people at their level, exactly at their level, where they're holding. It's only by creating that personal relationship, and it's very hard because a rabbi who's sitting in a shul in the morning has got at least 9 other people that he's dealing with. So you have to find a way, and by the way, they do this for children. It's done for children. They call it the children's minyan. Unfortunately, it's usually only on Shabbat and it's not on weekdays. But still, they go with the children step by step. So over 3, 4, 5, 6 years, you learn how to pray. And then when you become an adult and you go into the adult minyan, into the adult quorum, then you are already well versed or aware of it. But somebody who's coming to this at age 30, 40, 50, they're lost. And you really need to be able, like Rabbi Akiva had, someone who was willing to teach him Aleph Beis, even just to teach him the letters themselves, how to pronounce them, how to read. And then he came to the state where he actually, in the end, you never know, this person could become the greatest sage that we have. So the entire exodus from Egypt, the hardening of the heart, the apathy, or the confusion that result in a lack of questions, leave him stuck in his place. So really what he's saying is, or probably most of the Jews who find it, and non-Jews, who find it difficult to approach Torah, to approach the Jewish traditions, is mostly because of the hardening of the heart that comes from a feeling that there's no one to ask, that there's no way to really open up. And there are questions, God forbid, you can't ask. It's a faux pas. If you ask this question, who knows, the sky is going to fall down. That feeling has to be opened up in the person who's doing the Seder, who's running the Seder, which in a sense means that the people who are the leaders of the Jewish people today, they have to have a new world order. They have to look at the world differently and understand that we cannot take for granted that people can even engage in the conversation that they want to engage in. They have to be opened up. You have to come to them. You have to engage them. You have to make it interesting for them. And slowly they will open up. When they open up, they might be like Rabbi Akiva, the greatest sage that ever was. But it requires a whole new way of looking at things. And with this, I bid you farewell today and hope to see you tomorrow at 9:15 at a regular time. Bye-bye.